If you are currently staring at a silent phone screen and feeling the heavy sting of rejection because a man suddenly pulled away after you gave him your absolute best, stay right here, because this video will explain exactly why vanishing from his radar is the only path to reclaiming your leverage. It is exhausting to watch your deep emotional investment be met with cold indifference, leaving you trapped in a cycle of constant anxiety while trying to decode his shifting moods. If you are ready to uncover the psychological mechanics that turn your sudden absence into an agonizing fixation, this analysis is going to provide the precise answers and the clear path of transformation you have been desperately looking for. The core reason you are currently trapped in this cycle of emotional depletion is rooted in how society systematically conditions women to be agreeable, endlessly patient, and overly nurturing companions. You are taught from childhood that if a man withdraws his attention or shows signs of coldness, your immediate responsibility is to lean in further, offer more warmth, and over-communicate your feelings to save the connection. This toxic conditioning forces you to constantly suppress your own standard just to keep a man comfortable, making you believe that your endless tolerance will eventually teach him how to value your presence. When you allow this conditioning to dictate your actions, you end up playing the role of a predictable security net that requires absolutely zero effort to sustain. A man's primitive mind is psychologically hardwired to completely disregard any resource that is overabundant, constantly accessible, and entirely desperate for his validation. Your immediate responses to his late-night text messages and your willingness to rearrange your entire life for his convenience send a clear signal that his poor behavior carries no real penalties. You are essentially validating his mediocrity while reducing your own personal value to a permanent certainty. True respect is never negotiated through long paragraphs explaining your pain, nor is it bought by offering endless second chances to an individual who has chosen to treat you as an afterthought. You must possess the internal authority to stop treating his life as your primary focus, redirecting that massive stream of investment back into your own professional and personal expansion. The only way to disrupt his sense of absolute control over your emotional state is to introduce the freezing reality of your sudden, unexplained unavailability. By stepping completely into the shadows, you force his ego to face a massive void. Many women live constantly afraid that walking away or implementing a sharp boundary will cause the connection to dissolve permanently, so they choose to stay in a loop of constant accommodation. This fear is a major trap, because a man will never truly miss your presence until he completely loses his predictable access to your emotional energy. He expects you to chase him, he expects you to cry, and he expects you to beg for an explanation that he has no intention of providing. When you refuse to play that submissive role, you shatter the script he prepared, turning his confidence into deep confusion. Later in this video, we are going to dive much deeper into the advanced psychological architecture behind this chase, breaking down the exact mental patterns that occur in a man's mind when his certainty is broken. You will discover why your strategic unavailability triggers a biological alarm system that he cannot control, forcing him to watch your every move from a distance. Understanding these hidden mental triggers is the only way to shield your thoughts from the toxic traps of hypervigilance and regain your total sovereignty. Choosing to adopt the mindset of a black cat does not mean you are a robotic being who is entirely immune to the raw pain of a broken bond or the sadness of male neglect. The difference lies in the fact that you refuse to let that temporary internal discomfort dictate your actions or lower your established standards in front of a man. You choose to act rationally and remain unbothered, knowing that pulling your energy back without delivering a dramatic lecture is the highest form of self-preservation. You are happy and complete on your own, meaning that any partner who fails to facilitate your life will be left behind. Your capacity for joy is a sovereign structure that includes your professional goals, physical activities, and the deep, healthy connections you choose to cultivate with your friends and family. You must continue focusing on your projects at work and expanding your own world, ensuring that your life remains entirely full, regardless of his presence. When you live from this baseline of absolute completeness, vanishing from a toxic dynamic is not a manipulative game to get a reaction, but a natural result of your self-respect. You are simply closing the gate because he failed to match the premium price of your time. If you are ready to stop accepting crumbs of attention and want to ensure you keep your focus locked on your personal sovereignty, subscribe to the channel right now so you do not miss any of our upcoming advanced strategies. Joining this collective of high-standard women will reinforce your determination to never accept being a placeholder or sacrificing your crown for a man's comfort. This space serves as your definitive operational guide, providing the uncompromised clarity you need to navigate your dating life with absolute authority. Now, I am going to share the realistic narrative of a woman who faced this exact scenario, showing how her sudden decision to become completely unavailable exposed his mediocrity and flipped the leverage entirely in her favor. Pay close attention to her strategic reactions and her absolute refusal to over-explain her boundaries, as this story will provide your mind with a concrete example of how these dark feminine principles are executed in the real world.
The day Susan found her mystery.
Susan treated her intense ballet rehearsals as a private escape where she could build absolute physical and emotional control over her movements. Outside her demanding career, she maintained a warm relationship with her mother and a close circle of friends, frequently finding comfort in long weekend coffee dates or quiet nights watching series at home with her dog. Her life was fundamentally stable and happy, yet she had allowed Julian to occupy a permanent space in her schedule without requiring him to earn that level of access. Their relationship had developed a toxic pattern where he would consistently pull away or cancel plans at the last minute, fully confident that her sweet and accommodating nature would always be waiting to catch him. The definitive turning point occurred during an important performance evening when Julian failed to show up for her opening night, sending a brief, careless text message that completely minimized her months of hard work and artistic dedication. Susan felt a sharp wave of disappointment tighten in her chest, but she refused to allow her physical composure to break or give him the satisfaction of a chaotic, reactive confrontation. Instead of typing out long paragraphs explaining her pain or begging him to understand the basic decency of showing up, Susan chose to execute a clean and immediate withdrawal of her emotional investment. She packed her bags after her performance, spent the rest of the night laughing with her mother and dance colleagues, and completely vanished from Julian's daily radar without delivering a single word of warning or angry justification. She did not block his number to play a defensive game. She simply stopped viewing his presence as a necessity, redirecting her focus entirely back toward her career and her own personal vitality. For the next 4 weeks, Julian was met with a freezing vacuum of absolute silence that completely disrupted his fragile sense of control and threw his male ego into a state of intense confusion. He spent his nights staring at his phone, checking her social media for updates, and attempting to find any crack in her unbothered posture, only to find that Susan had become a total enigma to him. While he was busy panicking over the sudden loss of his predictable security net, Susan was continuing her daily routines, enjoying her cafes with friends, and sleeping peacefully because her happiness was no longer tied to his validation. A full month after her disappearance, Julian arrived at her studio doors, visibly shaken by the quiet authority she had maintained throughout her weeks of absence. He delivered a genuine, unprompted apology, admitting his past selfishness, and demonstrating a clear, actionable willingness to fix his behavior and respect the high standards he had previously ignored. Susan listened to his words with a calm, neutral expression, choosing to accept his return but completely shifting her baseline approach to ensure she would never enter a position of vulnerability again. She intentionally learned to become far more mysterious within the relationship dynamic, not as a manipulative trick to keep him hooked, but as a protective barrier to avoid wasting unnecessary energy explaining her daily movements. She stopped detailing every single aspect of her schedule, or counting on his presence to make her day complete, keeping her private world strictly guarded until his consistency proved he was worthy of her confidence. Julian began to treat her time as a premium privilege, stepping up his investment because he knew that her warmth was no longer a guaranteed commodity he could abuse. Susan stayed fully invested in her ballet career, her family connections, and her independent habits, maintaining a profound inner peace that Julian could no longer easily destabilize with his moods. She remained warm and sweet when his actions genuinely deserved it, but she carried the absolute certainty that she would vanish forever if the slightest sign of disrespect ever repeated itself. She was no longer a compliant companion waiting for his attention. Susan had successfully reclaimed her crown, fully aware that her willingness to be cold had saved her sovereignty.
the unbothered stance of power.
The decision to completely vanish when a man intentionally devalues your presence is the exact moment you transition from a desperate reactor into a figure of absolute authority. You must recognize that your willingness to disappear without a single trace of anger is the most devastating message you can ever deliver to an unstable ego. A man expects your behavior to be loud, chaotic, and completely driven by the need to extract an explanation from him to soothe yourself. When you deny him that predictable performance, his sense of control over your reality is instantly shattered into pieces. This strategic unavailability acts as a mirror that forces him to confront the immediate weight of his own mediocrity and the vacancy he created. While a compliant woman continues to plead for basic decency, an independent woman packs her energy and steps back without looking back a single time. Your sudden absence becomes a constant presence in his thoughts, disrupting his daily focus because he no longer has a secure baseline to measure his dominance. The leverage completely flips the second you choose to treat his careless behavior as an absolute disqualification, rather than a point of negotiation. If you have ever experienced this exact dynamic, where pulling your presence back completely changed the balance of your relationship, take a brief moment to share your personal story in the comments down below. Documenting the specific moment you chose your own sanity over his comfort helps solidify your new boundaries while showing others that detachment is a real weapon. Your shared experience serves as an uncompromised reminder that a woman who truly values her time does not bargain for basic respect. Most women completely fail to hold this boundary because they allow their temporary emotional pain to dictate their physical reactions during a conflict. You must understand that your self-worth is a sovereign structure that remains entirely unaffected by whether a man decides to appreciate your standards or walk away. When you operate from a position of total completeness, you no longer look at a broken bond as a tragic loss, but as a clean purification of your personal environment. You are not running away to trigger a chase. You are moving forward because your premium energy belongs only where it is fully matched. The precise behavior of a majestic panther in the wild perfectly reflects this unbothered posture of absolute power and emotional security. A feline never wastes its raw energy making loud noises or trying to force cooperation from an environment that does not serve its survival. It moves through the dark with an unhurried elegance, holding a confident stance, and simply withdraws into the deep shadows in total silence when a situation ceases to align with its internal standards. This calculated movement is never a sign of weakness, but a sharp demonstration of absolute certainty and total dominance over its territory. But here is a critical mistake where the vast majority of women destroy their own leverage right after making a strategic exit. They initiate the disappearance, but remain completely glued to his digital profile, monitoring his movements and waiting for a text message to validate their strategic choice. This hypervigilant behavior confirms that your mind is still entirely dependent on his reality, rendering your physical absence a complete illusion. True detachment requires you to completely close the access gate, ensuring your focus is fully invested in your own life and daily routines. Your independent vitality must remain completely active, keeping your thought processes locked onto your career goals, your fitness habits, and your family connections. You must enjoy your moments with your friends and maintain your inner peace without checking if he has noticed your silence yet. A sovereign woman is happy alone and does not require a relationship to feel complete, which makes her truly dangerous to a man who uses neglect as a weapon. Your capacity for fulfillment is an unshakable baseline that external volatility can never alter or diminish. When you master the art of being genuinely unbothered, your silence ceases to be a defensive shield and becomes an active display of your absolute sovereignty. You stop teaching men how to treat you through endless arguments, letting the freezing reality of your unavailability deliver the natural consequence of their actions. This silent boundary-building process ensures that your sovereignty remains entirely intact while exposing whether a partner possesses the internal security to match your level. You are the master of your environment, and mediocrity has no place within your borders. You must remain ruthlessly protective of your mental landscape as you move forward, refusing to grant second chances to anyone who breaks your trust or uses lies to hide their flaws. A single micro-betrayal or acts of disrespect must result in an immediate relocation of your sovereign energy, without warnings or long-winded justifications. Your standard must be unbending, communicating that your warmth is a premium privilege that will be permanently withdrawn the second it is taken for granted. This is how you shift from a state of constant anxiety to a position of total command. To fully execute this strategy without slipping back into old patterns of accommodation, you must understand the complex psychological mechanism operating behind his sudden obsession. It is not enough to simply walk away. You must comprehend how your calculated silence actively restructures his thoughts and alters his brain chemistry. In the next part of this video, we are going to dive deep into the advanced psychological architecture of both the male and female mind to reveal exactly why your disappearance reactivates his primitive drive to pursue you. If you are currently struggling to maintain your silence or feel tempted to break your absence because the internal anxiety is becoming too heavy to handle alone, you need an exact operational map to anchor your actions. The Black Cat Playbook is designed specifically to provide clear answers to these exact scenarios and prevent you from losing your leverage. This comprehensive digital guide delivers practical psychological frameworks that help you identify when a man is merely playing with your time, providing the precise tools needed to keep your composure while he watches from the shadows. You can secure your copy and start executing your transformation immediately by clicking the official link in the description down below.
Inside his mind after you disappear.
The psychological machinery that activates a man's intense fixation after you vanish is deeply rooted in his primitive need for absolute control and emotional certainty. When you are constantly present, his brain registers your energy as a fully conquered territory, which completely shuts down his natural drive to pursue or invest in the connection. The moment you introduce a sudden vacuum of unavailability, you disrupt his established mental patterns and force his ego to face an immediate threat of loss. If you are still here listening to this, congratulations, because you are gaining some strategic wisdom that most women never develop in their entire lives. This sudden lack of access triggers what behavioral scientists call scarcity focus, a cognitive shift that causes an individual to become entirely obsessed with whatever resource has been restricted. He starts replaying every past interaction in his head, desperately searching for a rational explanation for your sudden silence, because his ego cannot accept being discarded. He continues to monitor your life not because he suddenly cares about you, but because your absolute silence has completely taken away his ability to control your emotional reactions. The complete removal of your emotional attention transforms you into an unsolved puzzle that dominates his thoughts. A man who uses inconsistent attention as a weapon relies entirely on your predictable tendency to chase him whenever he chooses to pull away from your space. He enters this toxic dynamic to feed his own validation, assuming that your kindness will always guarantee an open door regardless of how poorly he treats your boundaries. When you stay in that reactive position, you are unknowingly reinforcing his belief that your personal value is remarkably low and completely under his command. His psychological security is entirely dependent on keeping you anxious, using your emotional distress to validate his authority. The second you step completely into the shadows without delivering an angry lecture, you flip the psychological leverage and force him to experience the exact anxiety he tried to inflict on you. He suddenly realizes that his calculated neglect did not break your spirit, but instead caused him to forfeit his premium access to your world entirely. This sudden shift leaves him feeling profoundly exposed because he no longer has a compliant partner absorbing his bad moods or validating his presence. Your quiet withdrawal acts as a brutal psychological mirror, exposing his selfish behavior as remarkably small. From the woman's perspective, adopting this unbothered posture is the ultimate catalyst for repairing her own mental health and rebuilding her shattered self-esteem after a period of neglect. When you stop dedicating your valuable time to analyzing a man's mixed signals, you instantly reclaim a massive amount of cognitive energy that belongs strictly to your own path. You shift your internal alignment from an anxious seeker of external validation to a sovereign observer who dictates her own terms. This internal recalibration allows your nervous system to fully settle, replacing constant hypervigilance with a profound sense of peace. As you sustain this strategic unavailability over time, your mind begins to internalize the reality that your happiness is an independent structure that does not require male approval. You stop viewing his silence as a devastating punishment and start recognizing it as a perfect opportunity to expand your personal sovereignty and focus on your career. This level of emotional autonomy completely alters your posture, making you appear remarkably grounded and unbending in your choices. You are no longer bargaining for basic decency because you have already become the absolute master of your environment. And here is something that almost nobody notices about this psychological shift. Your new mystery is not a performance designed to manipulate him, but a permanent relocation of your focus. If you only vanish to get a fast reaction, your energy will still project a desperate vibration that a man can instantly sense from a distance. True black cat energy requires you to be genuinely detached from the ultimate outcome, meaning you are entirely at peace whether he steps up his investment or disappears forever. Your silence is powerful because it represents an authentic refusal to waste your life on mediocrity. Over the upcoming months, this unbothered lifestyle creates a protective shield around your thoughts, ensuring that your emotional stability is never again tied to someone else's volatile behavior. You learn to navigate your daily routines with a quiet confidence, surrounding yourself with individuals who fully respect your boundaries and appreciate your presence. This psychological maturity prevents you from entering toxic power struggles, allowing you to walk away from low-effort dynamics before they can cause lasting damage. You become completely sovereign, moving through your life with absolute clarity. You must remember that a man's sudden surge of desire after you vanish is merely diagnostic data that reveals his inability to value a woman who is easily accessible. If he only shows up and improves his behavior when you are entirely out of reach, it confirms that he lacks the psychological maturity to maintain a healthy connection based on mutual respect. You must analyze his upcoming attempts to regain access with a cold, rational mind, refusing to let his performative distress soften your unbending standards. Your energy is a premium privilege, and it must never be given back to someone who required a crisis to recognize your worth. Understanding these deep psychological implications on your overall mental health is the essential foundation you need to protect your crown before you implement any practical strategies. It is entirely useless to change your physical behavior if your underlying mindset is still desperate for his validation and trapped in a loop of constant accommodation. Now that we have fully deconstructed how this silence affects both the male and female mind, we must examine how to filter his reactions to your new posture. In the next section, we will break down how to instantly distinguish a man who facilitates your long-term growth from a man who simply drains your peace.
Filtering true value from energy waste.
To navigate your relationships with complete sovereignty, you must learn to implement a strict behavioral filter that immediately separates men into two distinct categories. A facilitator is an emotionally mature partner whose natural drive is to make your existence easier, consistently adding peace, resources, and protection to your world because he genuinely respects your worth. On the complete opposite side of the spectrum is the drainer, a low-value individual who enters your life solely to consume your emotional energy and exploit your kindness. A drainer requires constant attention to feed his fragile ego, relying on manipulative mind games and calculated inconsistency to keep you trapped in a loop of toxic hypervigilance. When you successfully execute a complete withdrawal of your energy, a true facilitator will perceive your sudden absence as a direct signal that his past actions have deeply compromised his access to you. Because his internal psychological structure is firmly grounded in accountability, your silence forces him to reflect deeply on his own shortfalls and evaluate how his behavior failed to protect your peace. He does not lash out in anger or attempt to blame you for the distance, because his primary objective is to restore the safety of the connection. His response to your unbothered posture is a mature, actionable effort to correct his mistakes and rebuild your trust through verified consistency. The direct consequence of dealing with a facilitator is that your personal sovereignty and mental health remain completely protected, even when the relationship faces a major crisis. His presence naturally simplifies your daily routines, allowing you to focus your valuable energy on your career progression, your independent habits, and your family connections. He understands that your warmth is a premium privilege that must be continuously earned, meaning he will willingly step up his investment to match your high standards. With a facilitator, your strategic unavailability creates a clean environment of mutual growth where your boundaries are never treated as a challenge to be conquered. When a drainer is forced to face the exact same boundaries, His immediate reaction is driven entirely by intense panic and wounded pride rather than genuine concern for your well-being. Because he views your availability as a guaranteed commodity under his control, your sudden disappearance completely shatters his illusion of dominance and destabilizes his fragile ego. He does not look inward to correct his careless behavior, but instead focuses all his cognitive energy on finding a fast way to regain his validation. A drainer watches your life from a distance, simply because he cannot tolerate the reality that you are happy and complete without his approval. If you observe a drainer trying to claw his way back into your world after a period of absolute silence, you will notice that his initial approach is entirely performative and superficial. He will send vague, low-effort messages or try to trigger you through social media just to test your resilience, hoping that your past conditioning as an agreeable companion will cause you to break your boundary. If those manipulative tactics fail to extract a reaction from you, his hidden resentment will quickly rise to the surface, causing him to switch from empty declarations of love to absolute hostility. He is completely incapable of respecting your unbothered stance because your independence actively denies him the emotional control he craves. The devastating result of keeping a drainer in your personal environment is the continuous erosion of your cognitive clarity and the systematic destruction of your inner peace. He acts as a heavy emotional vacuum, constantly creating superficial chaos and testing your limits just to confirm that you are still anchored to his volatile reality. No matter how many times you practice assertive communication or clearly state your standards, a drainer will consistently repeat the same disrespectful patterns because he knows your patience has no real expiration date. Remaining in this dynamic ensures your own emotional bankruptcy while keeping you trapped in a submissive position. The precise manner in which you handle his initial attempts to reconnect will completely determine whether you maintain your crown or surrender your personal leverage back to mediocrity. When a facilitator approaches your boundaries with genuine remorse and actionable changes, your black cat energy dictates that you remain open to a rational conversation while keeping your distance. You do not offer immediate forgiveness or drop your guard, but you allow his upcoming actions to prove whether he is truly capable of maintaining your high standard over time. You remain entirely calm, letting him understand that your access is a luxury that must be protected. When filtering a drainer, your operational response must be a freezing wall of absolute indifference that completely cuts off his ability to access your thoughts. You must realize that any explanation you deliver to a low-value individual is a complete waste of your sovereign energy, as he will only use your words to formulate his next deceptive script. Your silence must be a definitive closure of the gate, communicating that his poor choices have permanently disqualified him from participating in your reality. You do not bargain for basic decency. You simply open the door, let him walk out, and lock it behind him forever. This strict filtering process is the only mechanism that ensures your long-term fulfillment remains completely independent of a man's fluctuating whims or temporary declarations of change. By forcing every individual to collide with your unbending boundaries, you effectively compel the wrong partners to eliminate themselves from your life before they can cause permanent psychological damage. You stop playing a passive role in your own devaluation, shifting your baseline approach into a position of absolute command over who deserves to step into your sanctuary. Your environment becomes a curated space of mutual respect, where mediocrity is instantly suffocated by your composure. Mastering this practical distinction between a partner who facilitates your life and an individual who drains your peace is the definitive prerequisite for reclaiming your total sovereignty. It is entirely impossible to protect your mental health if you lack the cold rationality required to filter his true intentions when you step back into the shadows. Now that you fully possess the psychological framework to analyze his reactions and distinguish true accountability from mere ego panic, you are completely ready to implement the concrete execution steps. Now, we will break down the exact operational playbook you must deploy to turn these boundaries into an unbreakable shield.
The Black Cat Playbook for Leverage.
To successfully execute your personal transformation and break the pattern of constant emotional availability, you must first initiate Step 1, which requires you to establish a hard communication boundary the exact second a man displays inconsistent behavior. You are no longer allowed to deliver long-winded messages or demand explanations for his sudden absence. because your words only validate his fragile sense of importance within the dynamic. If he cancels plans or pulls away without a valid reason, you must immediately cut off his access to your thoughts without giving warnings. Your strategic unavailability is the only mechanism that forces his mind to realize that your attention carries a high cost. The second step demands that you completely eliminate the dangerous habit of monitoring his digital profile or seeking indirect updates about his daily routine while you are practicing your silence. Many women commit a fatal error during this phase because they maintain physical distance but remain mentally tethered to his reality through constant screen tracking, which completely drains their cognitive energy. True black cat energy requires you to close the digital gate entirely, ensuring your focus returns strictly to your own environment. If you remain preoccupied with what he is doing from afar, your withdrawal is simply a cheap performance that he can easily detect. Step 3 dictates that you permanently relocate your valuable time towards expanding your personal milestones and protecting your long-term mental health stability. You must actively engage in your professional projects and advance your personal goals with absolute dedication, ensuring your fulfillment is never tied to a romantic outcome. When a man attempts to look into your world from a distance, he must find a woman who is completely occupied with her own expansion, rather than someone who is waiting by the phone. This level of vocational discipline reinforces your internal completeness and suffocates his illusion of control. The fourth step commands you to intentionally diversify all the other aspects of your life by anchoring your daily routines in consistent habits and maintaining strong external bonds. You should focus on your fluid fitness activities, such as running or weightlifting, and protect your peaceful interactions with your family members and your close circle of friends. Cultivating these high-value areas ensures your mind remains grounded in a rich reality that does not depend on a man's fluctuating whims to experience true joy. Your lifestyle must be vibrant and self-sustaining, proving to your own subconscious that you are whole alone. The fifth step requires you to implement the precise protocol for handling his inevitable return, ensuring you do not drop your non-negotiable standards the moment he delivers a superficial declaration of change. When he finally reaches out, after experiencing the freeze of your absence, you must analyze his approach with a cold, rational mind, rather than an anxious heart. If his initial attempt to reconnect consists of low-effort texts or subtle triggers designed to test your resilience, you must maintain your absolute indifference. You only acknowledge his presence if he presents verified accountability and a clear willingness to match your premium price. Step 6. Forces immediate and permanent disqualification, without a single second thought, if he ever chooses to repeat the exact same pattern of disrespect in the future. You must communicate your high behavioral standards through decisive actions, rather than emotional arguments, meaning you will never tolerate a second infraction after a boundary was clearly set. If he proves incapable of maintaining consistency, you must open the door and let him walk out of your sanctuary forever without offering closure. Your willingness to vanish completely is your ultimate weapon, because it proves you never bargain for basic respect. By systematically applying these 6 operational steps, you effectively transition from a reactive person into the absolute command of your dating environment. This practical guide is not designed to manipulate a specific reaction from an individual, but to insulate your nervous system from the destructive loops of hypervigilance and low-effort dynamics. You must hold your composure with an ironclad determination, understanding that your silence is a reflection of your supreme self-prioritization. Now that you possess the precise actionable playbook to enforce your autonomy, we must examine the final results of this journey.
The sovereign returned to peace.
The ultimate result of mastering your unexpected disappearance is the complete restoration of your internal serenity and personal power. You must realize that your capacity to stand unbothered in your own environment is the true metric of a high-value woman who refuses to allow external emotional chaos to disturb her focus. By locking your attention onto your own goals, you teach your subconscious mind that your happiness does not require his validation. This permanent shift in perspective breaks the invisible chains of relationship anxiety and grounds your reality in absolute emotional autosufficiency. As you step forward into this radiant phase of independence, you will find a profound sense of wellness filtering through every single aspect of your daily existence. Your physical vitality is naturally sustained by your fluid fitness habits, while your mind stays entirely balanced through the healthy and rich connections you choose to protect with your loved ones. You are not moving through the world with a heavy mask of artificial coldness, but with an authentic heart that is peaceful, sweet, and entirely complete on its own terms. This high emotional autonomy makes you an unbreakable force because you are happy alone without ever feeling isolated. If you are already experiencing this magnificent transformation, or have successfully closed the access gate on an inconsistent relationship, share your valuable personal experience in the comments down below, so our entire community can learn from your growth. Documenting the precise moment you chose your own mental health over his superficial validation helps solidify your new boundaries, while showing others that detachment is a real weapon. Your shared wisdom serves as a permanent reminder that a woman who truly values her time does not bargain for basic respect. By choosing to protect your crown and align your daily actions with these advanced behavioral principles, you are actively participating in a rapidly growing community of high-standard women who refuse to accept mediocrity. If you are ready to permanently lock your focus onto your personal expansion and protect your mental sanctuary from toxic men, make sure to subscribe to the channel right now so you never lose your direction. This collective space serves as your definitive guide to behavioral mastery, providing you with the necessary clarity and psychological tools to handle your sovereignty with total command. Your transformation is an ongoing process of self-respect that requires you to continuously filter who deserves premium access to the sanctuary of your life. You have successfully shattered the submissive loop of constant accommodation, and you must continue moving down this path of unbending standards with absolute pride. To deepen your strategic education and master the next level of dark feminine psychology, click on the card showing on your screen right now to watch our video about how to turn his disrespect into obsession. Stay locked into your high value, hold your composure tightly, and continue commanding the respect you fully deserve as the sovereign woman that you are.
I hope you enjoyed this video. I would really love if you could drop a comment to tell me what you think, and I'll see you in the next one.